وسيدة نساء العالمين وقرة عين الرسول ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين ويعصوب الدين علي بن أبي طالب وصي رسول الله ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليكم أيها الحسن والحسين سبتي نبي الرحمة وسيري شباب أهل الجنة أجمعين ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليكم أئمة المعصومين من ذرية الحسين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين. السلام عليك يا مولاي يا صاحب العصر والزمان. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن. السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان. عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله تعالى مخرجك وظهورك وجعل الله من أعوانك وانصارك والمستشرين بين يديك وتحت لوائك. السلام عليكم يا أهل بيت النبوة جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته.
صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ألف لام ميم. غلبت الروم في أدنى الأرض وهم من بعد غلبهم سيغلبون في بضع سنين. لله الأمر من قبل ومن بعد ويومئذ يفرح المؤمنون بنصر الله ينصر من يشاء وهو العزيز الرحيم. وعد الله لا يخلف الله وعده ولكن أكثر الناس لا يعلمون ظاهرا من الحياة الدنيا وهم عن الآخرة هم غافلون. أولم يتفكروا في أنفسهم ما خلق الله السماوات والأرض وما بينهما إلا بالحق وأجل مسمى وإن كثيرا من الناس بلقاء ربهم لكافرون. أولم يسيروا في الأرض فينظروا كيف كان عاقبة الذين من قبلهم كانوا أشد منهم قوة وأثاروا الأرض وعمروها أكثر مما عمروها وجاءتهم رسلهم بالبينات فما كان الله ليظلمهم ولكن كانوا أنفسهم يظلمون. ثم كان عاقبة الذين أساءوا السوء أن كذبوا بآيات الله وكانوا بها يستهزئون. الله يبدأ الخلق ثم يعيده ثم إليه ترجعون. ويوم تقوم الساعة يبلس المجرمون ولم يكن لهم من شركائهم شفعاء وكانوا بشركائهم كافرين. ويوم تقوم الساعة يومئذ يتفرقون فأما الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات فهم في روضة يحبرون وأما الذين كفروا وكذبوا بآياتنا ولقاء الآخرة فأولئك في العذاب محضرون. فسبحان الله حين تمسون وحين تصبحون وله الحمد في السماوات والأرض وعشيا وحين تظهرون. يخرج الحي من الميت ويخرج الميت من الحي ويحيي الأرض بعد موتها وكذلك تخرجون. ومن آياته أن خلقكم من تراب ثم إذا أنتم بشر تنتشرون. ومن آياته أن خلق لكم من أنفسكم أزواجا لتسكنوا إليها وجعل بينكم مودة ورحمة إن في ذلك لآيات لقوم يتفكرون. ومن آياته خلق السماوات والأرض واختلاف ألسنتكم وألوانكم إن في ذلك لآيات للعالمين. ومن آياته منامكم بالليل والنهار وابتغاؤكم من فضله إن في ذلك لآيات لقوم يسمعون. صدق الله العلي العظيم.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you all for coming. Today our speech presentation will be given by Sister Stacy Ford, and she has a master's in special education. And her topic of discussion is how can we support people with special needs in the community. Without further ado, I would like to welcome her and thank her for accepting our invitation with the last salawat. Allah.
Thank you so much for having me here. Just a little background about myself. Education is my 5th career. I started in the art world, and then I went to IT and then engineering, and then I became an advocate for people with disabilities because I have a daughter with Down syndrome, and that led me into education. And so I am very happy where I am and feel like I have a lot to give to the world about how to educate people, and specifically people with special needs. So I wanted to share with you all some things that I've learned as a parent, but also working with many students. I currently tutor, and I also teach teachers. So I have had about 12 years of experience doing that. So I wanted to start with really what special needs means. And it can be a physical disability. Some people use a wheelchair. Some people use walking sticks. Some people have mental things that they're working through. And sometimes it's environmental. They have very strong sensitivities to their environment. It could also be social. Some people, specifically people with autism, they tend to have a very strong sensitivity to being in a social arena around people. And it can be emotional, it can be spiritual. So I'm hoping to help the community understand how we can guide them, support them, and provide accommodations for them so that they feel more included in our society. And I'm going to try to get our slide. We're going to go to the next slide. All right. So something that is not really understood very well is how our kids behave, because they do behave differently because they have such sensitivities, or they have different ways of thinking about things, different ways of interpreting things, and so behavior becomes a pretty big deal. Usually there are triggers with kids, with adults. They will, so I've listed some, just a few. I mean, there are lots of things that could trigger a person, but some very typical ones are loud noises. So just hearing a loud noise might have someone scream out or get up and behave, in a kind of undesirable way. Bright lights can trigger some people. Strong smells. If sometimes, specifically with people with autism, if you're standing a little bit too close, that's very uncomfortable to them, and that can have them have some sort of meltdown. A lot of times people are very sensitive in their skin, and clothing that we wear, may not irritate our skin, but they're so sensitive that a lot of fabrics are very irritable, and that can cause a lot of problems, and not really anything in their environment, but just because of the clothing they're wearing is very irritable. Sometimes if they're in an unfamiliar place, they might elope, which means they just open a door and they walk out, and they just keep walking. They don't realize the dangers of a road. They don't realize they're away from their family. It's pretty dangerous. And then also tone of voice. how you say something, keeping voice very gentle and very supportive is really important because, again, they're in general, I'd say very sensitive, and so they pick up on tone and, of course, word choice. So sometimes families have worked with their child enough to where they know certain words resonate with them, and so I think it's important to kind of know about a child, and usually the family has that information, and that way everybody's on the same page. All right. So wanted to talk a little bit about how we can support them. So I just mentioned about consulting with the family because obviously they are going to be the ones that know the most. They've been raising their child and they've already been through this. And so having some sort of document that that could be shared with everybody that works with that person can be aware of what the triggers are, how to meet the needs of that individual, and also how to de-escalate, because a lot of times it's a learning process. So when you've been around children or adults enough, you can start to see things escalate, their behavior changes, and then before something, more serious happens. And that's really what you want to be at that level where you're sensitive and you're understanding, something's not right, and then you can intervene and do something before something worse happens. That's the ultimate. But then it's also important to know that if something does happen, then the people around, they know how to de-escalate. They know how to keep everybody safe, the person safe and people around safe. And then, of course, we always learn, right? We learn, we do better, we learn, we do better. It's an iterative process. So I just have a few things listed here that that we can think about people with autism. These are just a few things. The list could go much longer, but I talked a little bit about the sensitivity to clothing, light, sound, the environment. They also can rock. Another typical behavior is that they rock back and forth, and this is kind of a soothing thing to them. They can do hand flapping, which is just kind of this. They're just literally just flapping their hands, or they're flapping somehow. They can make really strange noises. They like to repeat sometimes what you say, and it's not an offensive thing. It's called echolalia, where they just repeat. They want to repeat what you're saying, and that's also kind of an indication that they're not really understanding what you're saying. They want to understand, but they're not really at that level. So another thing is that they can have a literal understanding. So a lot of times our speech, when we speak to each other, we don't always say exactly what we mean. And there's a lot of interpretation. Well, with a child or an adult with autism, sometimes that just goes over their head. They typically do not like to look at you in the face eye to eye. So there's a lot of, looking down at the ground. It's not an offensive thing, it's part of their autism. They may talk in a monotone voice without really kind of any expression. They may not understand the inferencing or any kind of subtleties that might be in the conversation. Certainly not any kind of joke or anything like that. That's kind of something that's not, they don't really process that. Let's see, they can also intensely react to something they don't like. So it can be things that are pretty normal to us, but to them, that's why it's important to know from the family what those triggers are, because it could be something that we probably wouldn't even know about. And it can really turn into an undesirable event, and that's what we really hope is to try to avoid that. It's traumatic for everybody, the person and people around. So, see, I wanted to talk a little bit about, so there are many disabilities, but I work with a lot of children with autism, and then my daughter was born with Down syndrome, and so I know a lot about these two areas. So people with Down syndrome, they tend to be shy. There is a range with any disability. There's a range of high functioning, low functioning. High functioning could be just a little kind of awkward to us. Low functioning would be nonverbal, like they need to have a communication pad, or they sign, or they make noises, and you just have to learn what those noises mean. And then you've got that whole range of the cognitive ability. Some, have Asperger's, which is described as being like off the charts brilliant, to really maybe not having functional skills like being able to put on their clothes or brush their teeth or tie their shoes. So there's this huge range. Some children or adults with Down syndrome, they can have speech delays, they can be nonverbal, they may not have the cognitive skills to really understand what you're saying. So again, it may be where you need to use a language that is familiar to them, that information would come from the family, or people that know that person really well. In general, they are very loving, super loving. They want to please, very loving people, and very sensitive. They like to be, helpful with something, and they tend to get upset when something is morally wrong. They have some kind of intuitive compass that they know when something's not right, and that really upsets them. So something that if you do see a behavior that's out of the ordinary, it could be something's not right, and that's kind of nice to review what happened or what went on, so that we can. It's kind of like being a detective. You can figure out what started all of that. So it's really important to, I think, to have an inclusive community. If you look back in the history, people with disabilities have a horrible history. I won't go into the details because it's just not pleasant. But we've grown to this point to where we're having conversations about it. Our kids are not shipped off to some institution where nobody sees them forever and ever and ever. They're included in schools, and there actually have been TV shows with people with Down syndrome and autism, and there have been people that have, there was a girl that became a model, and there was another person that was part of, it was either a senator or representative's aide. So people have, there's better education, and people are learning better skills so that they can be part of our community. And I think that's important to continue talking about it and including them as anybody else would. Their feelings are just like our feelings. They know when they're not being included. They do understand that. So I think that is it. Thank y'all so much. I appreciate y'all listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ford. As you can see, her information is on the PowerPoint presentation. If you guys have any follow-up questions or any comments or concerns, you can definitely reach out to her, and I would advise email before calling. So there's that. Thank you, Ms. Ford, for accepting our invitation and doing this presentation for us. Now I can invite Shayk Jafar to Now I can invite Sheikh Jafar to come and give a lecture with a loud salawat.
صل على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين أرواحنا له فداء. أما بعد فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم فإن كان الذي عليه الحق سفيها أو ضعيفا أو لا يستطيع أن يمل هو فليملل وليه بالعدل واستشهدوا شهيدين من رجالكم فإن لم يكونا رجلين فرجل وامرأتان ممن ترضون من الشهداء. صدق الله العلي العظيم. So, as many of you know, that today is also considered the Wiladat, the birthday of Ali Akbar, the son of Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam. So I just want to begin just giving a little bit about Ali Akbar, as we also mentioned him on the Salatul Jum'ah, that Ali Akbar was someone who had the most resemblance to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As Imam Hussein alayhi wasallam himself, he stated that on the day of Ashura in the plains of Karbala, that O Allah bear witness that the one who is ashbahu khalqan wa khulqan li rasulik, that he is going out into the battlefield, that he is the most resembling in his akhlaq, in his mannerism, and the way he looks to Rasulullah. But as well, Ali Akbar, he had a relationship with, again, part of his, or let me put it this way, from one side of his family, from the side of his mother, Layla, Abu Sufyan was the great-grandfather of Ali Akbar. And of course, from the side of his father, Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was his great-grandfather. Layla, her mother was Maymuna, the daughter of Abu Sufyan. Her father was Abu Murrah, who was the son of Urwa. And Urwa, he was one of the supporters of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, from Bani Mas'ud al-Thaqafi. So he's from the Thaqafi clan. And if we understand this lineage of Ali Akbar alayhi salatu wasalam, again from his mother's side, so his paternal grandfather, his paternal great-grandfather, or one of his paternal great-grandfathers, is Abu Sufyan. The other maternal grandfather is Urwa. And Urwa was one of those individuals who supported Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And because of his support, his tribe actually betrayed him. From his mother's side as well, we find that Ali Akbar, he would be the cousin, they will be second cousins basically, of Mukhtar al-Thaqafi. The Mukhtar is the same who rose up after the event of Karbala. So Ali Akbar, alayhi salam, that one of his grandfathers, or great-grandfathers, Urwa, was also shaheed, like Ali Akbar. Is Rashid also like the father of Ali Akbar? I just want to point out this one kind of aspect, because we may, and sometimes some people, they look at this physical aspect of our lives and they make judgments based on that. And so, and this was also one of the judgments that was made with regards to Ali Akbar on the day of Ashura. They said, oh, well, look, if his great-grandfather's Abu Sufyan, then let's give him peace. And let's give him an out of this battle, this epic battle which is about to happen. But of course, Ali Akbar, he refused that. He says that, look, if you want to take that part of my lineage, he says, yes, I understand that, and I recognize that part of my lineage. He says, but the other side of my lineage, that I am related to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that is of greater importance, to associate me with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that nahnu wa baytullah awla bin nabi. This is the greatest connection that we should have, the greatest identity that we should have should be that with of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In fact, all of the believers are connected to Rasulullah, as Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he stated, Ya Ali, ana wa ant abawa hadhihi al-ummah, that you, O Ali, you and I are the patriarchs of this ummah. Meaning that if we connect to Rasulullah, if we connect to, again, that continuation of the principles for which Rasulullah, he stood for, if we stick with that in Imam Ali, because that was, again, what Imam Ali alayhi salatu wasalam, he championed the mission of Rasulullah, then you will find that not only would we live in a way, in a manner that society would be heading in the right direction, that every aspect of our lives would be based on what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us. Every difficulty in society will be something that, again, we have a measure of guidance for. Even the issue that was spoken about tonight, which is a very important issue, and it should be raised, and it should be spoken about, and it should be understood within our community that, yes, there are people who have needs and special needs. And when they have those needs, then the guardians of those individuals, and even the society in itself, should be understanding, should be connecting, should be engaging with individuals of all different needs and spectrums of physical ability or physical disability, of neurodiversity, whether that neurodiversity, whether you may think that, oh, hey, this person has kind of complete intellectual aptitude, or someone who their intellectual aptitude may be challenged. And we find this command, or this, this action within the Quran in verse 282 of Surah Al-Baqarah. SubhanAllah, this is over 1,400 years ago. Over 1,400 years ago. Where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is advising us and giving us guidelines of how to deal with individuals who are on different spheres of disability. And there is an unfortunate history that, as Stacy Ford, she mentioned, you can look in the history books. Unfortunately, even within some of the, you could say, Muslim communities as well, that unfortunate history is there, but it doesn't mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't give us guidance, or He gave us guidance. But it is up to us to understand that guidance, to listen to that guidance, and to follow what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He has stated. So in verse 282 of Surah Al-Baqarah, which is in fact the longest verse in the Quran itself, the longest verse in the Quran. And the verse deals with social transactions, especially if someone takes a loan and how do they deal with that loan? How do they deal with business deals within a society? Near the middle of this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَإِنْ كَانَ الَّذِي عَلَيْهِ الْحَقِّ سَفِيهًا أَوْ ضَعِيفًا أَوْ لَا يَسْتَطِيعُ أَن يُمِلَّ هُوَ فَلْيُمْلِلْ وَلِيُّهُ بِالْعَدْلِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says that, look, he's explained this concept of making trade, making business deals, taking loans, repaying loans within society. He says that, however, if there's an individual within that society where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he describes them, he says that they're safi, and I'm going to explain this, da'if, or la yastati, person who doesn't have the ability. So either that person is safi. In Arabic, safi means someone who, they may not completely understand how to maybe deal with money or deal with certain transactions. So in other words, that individual maybe have some sort of mental challenges. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he doesn't say that, oh, keep that person out of business, keep them out of society. Allah says, no, if they are safi, or if they're weak, they're feeble, there's something wrong with them. Maybe they have some sort of physical ailment. They can't write their own transactions, maybe, so you need someone else to help them. Or that person says, la yastati'. La yastati' is very general, meaning that for some reason, they're unable. There's something that is restricting their ability to function as someone else can function in that society. So what happens? أَيُّمِلَّ هُوَ, he's not able to. لَا يَسْتَطِيعُ أَن يُمِلَّ هُوَ فَلْيُمْلِلْ وَلِيُّهُ بِالْعَدْلِ. So then that person's guardian comes forth and assists them. That person who may have maybe mentally challenged, that person who may be physically challenged, or may have whatever challenge or disability or inability to function on their own, then that guardian must come forth. And of course, that guardian, first and foremost, and primarily is who? Maybe a parent, could be a grandparent. And let's say, for example, if the parents have passed away, they have no other relatives, then who is that wali? It is the believers. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he tells us in the Quran, he says that إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ بَعْضُهُمْ أَوْلِيَاءُ بَعْضٍ. So the believers, they are the guardians of one another. So that means that that individual who needs assistance, who needs help, who needs aid, they will always have a guardian. Either their parents, a blood relative, the believers themselves in general, the faqih, the hakim al-shara, who will be there to be their wali, to assist them in dealing within society, creating transactions. Salawat. And this is one of the things that, I'm going to go through all of these particular disabilities. This is one of the things that I had spoken about in Muharram 2 years ago, about these disabilities, or at least the way Islam, it speaks about mental health. And this is one of the things that, if you look into the ahadith and you look into the Quran from Ahlul Bayt, there's actually a deep level of instruction of including those who are, safi or da'if, or those individuals who need help in society. In fact, Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba, alayhi salatu wasalam, he said that there's one individual that he knew, and the way the riwayat says, he says, kana lahu sadiq. He had a friend. And what was this friend? This friend he would be in and out of with this state of, you could say, state of mental sanity. He says, kana majnoon dawriyan. So So sometimes he would, show signs of, mental stability, and other times he would not. But one of the things that it showed that Imam Hassan al-Mushtabah, alayhi wasallam, he always inquired about him. Like whenever he saw him, he says, Kayfa asbahtum? How are you? How are you today? And so this is one of the things that we learn from our deen. This is an issue that we should not take lightly, and I would say that we should go back and read verse 282 of Surah Al-Baqarah, reflect upon it, especially upon those verses, that segment of verse 282 where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about those individuals. Inshallah, go read the tafsir. I don't want to prolong too much, but it is something that I think we all need to do. We all need to recognize and not shy away from befriending those who have special needs. We should not shy away from keeping them within our company, interacting with them, based on normalcy, and of course, based on those guidelines that Stacy Ford, she mentioned, of course, with kindness, maybe understanding what those triggers are and not triggering those who may be triggered, unlike us, ourselves, because we all have our triggers, I should say. We have our buttons. Somebody pushes our buttons, then we lose our cool, or we get upset. So I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to continue to guide us by His glorious Quran and by the example of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad, that we may too embody that trait and characteristic of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, just as his grandson Ali Akbar, that we may be also close to the Prophet khalqan wa khulqan, at least in our, if not in our appearance, but at least in our actions and our mannerism. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Allahumma ighfir dhunubana wastur uyubana وقضي حوائجنا واشفي مرضانا وارحم امواتنا وعجل فرج مولانا صاحب العصر والزمان واجعلنا من اعوانه وانصاره والمستشهدين بين يديه وتحت لواء بحق محمد واله الطاهرين. شاء الزيارة. السلام عليك يا نبي الله، السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا صاحب السكينة، السلام عليك أيها المدفون في المدينة ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا بضعة رسول الله، السلام عليك يا فاطمة زهرة سيدة نساء العالمين وقرة عين الرسول ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين ويعصوب الدين علي بن أبي طالب ووصي رسول الله ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليكم أيها الحسن والحسين سبتي نبي الرحمة وسيدي شباب أهل الجنة أجمعين ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليكم أئمة المعصومين من ذرية الحسين. السلام على علي بن الحسين زين العابدين. السلام على محمد بن علي باقر علم النبيين. السلام على جعفر بن محمد الصادق الأمين. السلام على موسى بن جعفر الكاظم. السلام على علي بن موسى الرضا راض بالقدر والقضاء. السلام على محمد بن علي الجواد التقي. السلام على علي بن محمد الحادي النقي. السلام على حسن بن علي الزكي العسكري. السلام على حجة بن الحسن القائم المنتظر المهدي. السلام عليك يا مولاي يا صاحب العصر والزمان. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن. السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان. عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله تعالى مخرجك وظهورك. السلام عليكم يا أهل بيت النبوة وموضع الرسالة جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Assalamu alaikum. Sisters, please wait for the brothers to exit the building first. Brothers, please, let's exit the building swiftly, and then we can allow the sisters to come follow. Thank you.